family and just check in with each other. We know this has been a stressful time for everyone as we've been dealing with this unprecedented experience in our lifetime, and we know it's been very disruptive to our work lives and even our personal lives to some degree. So the other thing about this is that the COVID-19 situation is just continually changing. And so we know that you have a lot of questions, and we're going to try to answer as many as possible, and see if we even do have the answers to these. So if we can't answer your question, if we can't get to it, we will post some answers to the coronavirus website. You can access that website by going to our homepage, which is utia.tennessee.edu. It has a ton of great information in it, so I do encourage you to take the time to go in and look at that website. There are a couple of housekeeping items. We're only taking questions through the chat function on your Zoom screen. So it's down there in the lower bar of your screen. So if you do have a question that you'd like us to answer, please enter it into that chat box. If you're calling in as a group, it looks like we have a lot of singles out there thus far, but if you are calling in as a group, be sure to practice some social distancing. That's what we're trying to do here, but we did need to fit into the screen, so we might be a little closer than we should be. But please try to do that in everything that you do, actually. Your audio, if you're on a phone or on this Zoom call, has automatically been muted. Please keep it that way because it's really hard for people to hear if somebody's audio is on. So unless you're called upon to answer a question, please keep it muted. And just a note, a special note that this session is being recorded and our plan is to post it also onto our coronavirus website. So we have 3 goals for today. The first is to give an overview of how we are responding to the COVID-19 pandemic as an institute. We want to share some insight on the guidance that we've provided to you thus far through the many communications you've received. And what we really hope is to think about how we might learn from this experience and how to help us make the Institute of Agriculture an even better place to be. So we're going to jump right in. And first and foremost, Dr. Cross, if you want to explain why this is called a fireside chat.
Yeah, great place to start. You know, all week I've been feeling like we were really just immersed in this coronavirus situation. A lot of communication going on, and yet I have felt somewhat disconnected, if you will, from our entire workforce. So I started thinking about how could we connect, how could we have a conversation that is helpful, hopefully informative, but also provide some assurance that we've got plans in place that are going to be helpful to our institute. And I've been hearing a lot in the media, as you probably have as well, that we're really at war with coronavirus right now. And I started thinking back to Franklin Delano Roosevelt, and as he was managing this country through the Great Depression and also through World War II, he was known for having a series of radio broadcasts, mostly in the evenings, where he shared information with our nation about what was being done, what the status of the Depression was, or what our actions were with regard to World War II. And I started thinking, and those were generally referred to since then as fireside chats. Now, I don't want anybody to think I'm comparing myself to Franklin Delano Roosevelt, nor do I want anybody to panic and think we are now in a Great Depression or about to enter a world war. But I think in many ways, it's a similar situation that there's a lot of uncertainty, a lot of stress across not only our nation, but across the world. And so I thought, well, perhaps a fireside chat would be a good way for us to connect and begin to make sure that you have the communication you need to be able to continue to perform your job.
Very good. So as we have as an institute been thinking about how we approach our response to COVID-19, what are our priorities?
And again, I think that's where our leadership team, including our deans, vice chancellors, and directors, that's where we started as we saw this situation starting to shape up last week and the week before. we have to have sort of anchors that we build from, or a foundation that we build from, and we identified 4 early on. First and foremost, the health and safety of our workforce, of our students, and of those that we serve is one of our top priorities and will remain a top priority throughout this pandemic. Secondly, I think it's really important for those here on campus especially, that our students be able to continue to progress towards their degrees. And that means completing the credits that they were enrolled in this semester. For our seniors and graduate students, those that are scheduled to graduate, ensuring that they graduate on time so they can continue with their education or continue with their career plans. Thirdly, we want to continue the research work that we have underway. We don't want to lose a project that's been underway for 9 months, a year, 2 years, because of any disruption in our work schedule. And likewise, we want to continue to provide education across the state through our extension programs and other outreach programs, because if you think about it, there's probably more information needed by more people right now than ever before, or at least in recent history. And then our fourth and final priority was to be sure in our College of Veterinary Medicine that we're continuing to meet emergency needs and critical care needs of animals and animal owners throughout this crisis. So those 4 priorities really formed the foundation of how we started to approach then developing some guidance and policies to deal with the pandemic.
So one of the first actions that you took was to appoint a task force that really is focusing clearly on this topic. Do you want to talk a little bit about that group?
Yeah, I'd be glad to. So we early on knew that while our administrative team, which I can't tell you how hard they've been working and how helpful they've been, they don't have a corner on the market for good ideas. And we recognize we have a lot of talented faculty, staff, and other employees in the Institute of Agriculture that we knew could contribute great ideas. So I know that Dr. Marcy Souza is on the call. She agreed to chair this task force. And that group includes faculty and staff, as I mentioned, that are helping to make decisions about how we go about implementing things like new online learning delivery, whether it's in the classroom or across the state, how we ensure safety in our labs at a time when we're encouraging social distancing, and just a number of other things. And as you mentioned earlier, Lisa, we've got a new website up for UTIA-specific coronavirus information, and that task force was really instrumental in developing that website and populating it with materials that are helpful to everyone in terms of continuing communication.
Great. So as you see it, what actions can we take as an organization and even personally to try to protect the health and safety of our workforce as well as each other?
And this is where I think we continue to get a lot of questions. I think we do want to protect everyone, just like we do even before the virus, right? We're always thinking about how to make sure we remain safe and healthy. With the virus outbreak in particular, there are obviously 2 critical measures that CDC continues to remind us about. One is simply washing your hands frequently, and the second is social distancing. So clearly any strategy we adopted had to emphasize both of those. And when you think about social distancing, and then you think about our work environments, it was real obvious to us from the start. Many of our offices can only ensure social distancing if we don't have so many people in the office. So telecommuting and working remotely were immediate thoughts that we had in terms of how to respond to this coronavirus. Everybody also recognizes that's not something we've got a lot of experience with. We haven't had a lot of people working that way before. Other industries and sectors did have a lot of experience, but for the Institute of Agriculture, that's new territory. So we've really encouraged our administrative team, our supervisors, to communicate with our employees and to the extent possible, encourage everyone to work remotely and to telecommute while performing their job responsibilities.
So these actions that we take, can that eliminate the coronavirus?
Well, I wish I could say it could or would, but honestly, I think what we're doing is what the rest of the nation is trying to do at this point, and that is slow the spread of this virus. We're really not going to be able to eliminate it, even by social distancing and good sanitation. It's possible this will continue to spread, but if we can slow the rate of that spread such that our healthcare system is not overwhelmed with a huge number of cases simultaneously, I think it's up to us to do our part to try to achieve that objective. So we're not going to fool ourselves and think we're going to stamp out the coronavirus by what we're doing, but we are taking these steps to slow the spread and to do our very best to reduce the chances of any of our employees and any of our stakeholders contracting this disease in conjunction with the work of the Institute.
And as they say, flattening the curve.
That's right.
Just reducing the numbers.
Yep.
So we've talked a lot about telecommuting. So what if, for various reasons, childcare purposes, whatever, that we have to be absent? How do we handle that?
So a couple of thoughts there about absences and telecommuting. First of all, if you think about telecommuting, it's just a different place that you're working from, but it's still, hopefully, in many ways, the same responsibilities and achieving the same overall objectives that you've always had. And just like working in the office, if you're sick, you have sick leave to draw on. If you have personal needs, you still have annual leave to draw on. And if neither of those work while you're in a telecommuting or remote working status, I think that's the point where you engage in a conversation with your supervisor to determine if there's some other approach possible. We really hope with telecommuting and flexible work scheduling that we can avoid challenges or situations where it's simply not possible to continue performing job responsibilities.
And some people have said that, they may have seen their workflow diminish to some degree. So what can they do to maybe fill that space?
Yeah, so I think, I've experienced some of this myself. Now, on the one hand, it seems like coronavirus consumes 24 hours a day of my life right now. On the other hand, I don't have back-to-back meetings anymore. I don't have, events going on across the state. And I've realized that I've got different time available than what I've had in the past. And so what I suspect many of you are feeling somewhat the same way. So what if we say, well, our current day-to-day responsibilities maybe have diminished somewhat, but could we use this time to really look long-term at some other things we can do that will make us productive and effective as an institute or in our own individual jobs for years to come. So there's been some ideas put forth which are called transformational work ideas. And the idea is, how can you transform your work to be something that even after this coronavirus makes it better, makes it more effective, leads to greater impacts, leads to even more fundamental educational outcomes and so forth. What can we do long term? So there's a whole list of ideas that we've developed that if your day-to-day tasks are done, if you will, but the day is not done, then there's some opportunities to consider professional development, certificate programs, any number of things that would be an investment in yourself for the future, which hopefully would then position the Institute after this virus passes to be in even better position than we were before the virus struck. So take advantage of this crisis to really make some changes and improve and enhance programs while we have some time to do that.
Right. Well, I want to remind everybody that you do have an opportunity to ask questions through the chat box on this Zoom call, but we did have some people give us some questions ahead of time, and so we'll take a look at some of those. One is, this person asks, if someone were to test positive for COVID on our campus, would the buildings just then be off limits? How are we going to handle that kind of situation if we do have a case in one of our buildings?
So in the event someone tests positive, I think the first thing we will do is work very closely with the Department of Health in whatever county that is. If it's Knox County here on campus or if it's across the state, we'll really work closely with them to determine who else may have been exposed, what other requirements would there be for self-isolation or self-quarantine, and how do we control that work environment if the person was still at work. during this period of time. So that I think is first and foremost. And then secondly, I think we need to be careful that we don't overreact. Someone suggested to me, well, if anyone tests positive in the Knoxville campus, we would shut down the whole university. And I think, everything has to be done with some common sense, and I don't believe that would be a logical outcome, but it might well trigger some additional steps or some additional guidance that we'd want to take with regard to health and safety. So I think that's the way I would respond to that.
So along those lines, someone's asking what the protocol would be for cleaning our buildings, particularly surfaces that get touched on a regular basis, elevator buttons and bathrooms, that kind of thing. How are we handling that?
Good. So let me give a little background. All week long, myself and others from the Institute leadership team have been involved with the University of Tennessee Policy Group, who's really been looking at really high-level decisions about students being removed from campus, about how to maintain our facilities and so forth. And I know that here on campus, the facility staff is now doing much more frequent cleanings, and they're doing deeper cleanings when they are taking care of our facilities. So on campus, I know that there are extra efforts being taken. It's harder for me to respond to that off campus because every location is different. And I actually think that may be an area, I appreciate the question, because that may be an area that we want to follow up with our facilities managers across the state to be sure where those facilities are still active, if you will, with employees present, that we take some steps to make sure we're using proper sanitation methods. And that also reminds me, just within the last 24 hours or so, I know that many of our facilities are moving to a mode of no public access and only employee access. So that certainly reduces the risk for exposure through those facilities.
Thinking about that does not include the UT Gardens, correct?
Yeah, that's right. So, we've had some conversations about that. I think outdoor spaces are a whole different situation, obviously, than indoor spaces. And how do you really close an outdoor space? I'm not sure in many cases that it's possible to do so. So I think, again, it's a matter of common sense. If you're going to take a stroll in the garden over at Jackson or in Crossville or here in Knoxville, do it with proper social distance between you and others. Be careful what you touch and how you interact within that garden, and I believe that should minimize any risks or dangers. Let me take advantage of the fact that we have an expert with us here this afternoon, Dr. Souza. Anything that you would add to my response there with regard to outdoor spaces or even the safety of indoor spaces?
Well, so one thing, certainly, get out there and enjoy the weather when it gets nice in the next few weeks. I know, so I live close to Iams Nature Center, and I went home yesterday, and the car park was packed. And so it's great to get outside, but you still need to keep in mind that you don't want to be all bunched up with lots of people. So try and get out there on your own. Regarding the disinfection of buildings, one thing that I think would probably be a good opportunity for anyone in the, satellite offices, so throughout the other 95 counties, is to reach out to either whatever your local health department is or your school system and see who they use and what their protocols are for disinfecting during a flu outbreak, because that's probably going to be a similar protocol that could be used in our buildings.
Great, thanks, Dr. Susan. I just saw Dr. Burns pop on. Robert, have you provided any guidance on that with the county directors, or have, any communication you've had about that? And you'll have to unmute yourself, Robert. You'll have to unmute at your. There you go.
Yeah, thanks. I couldn't unmute. Somebody else had to. Thank you.
Okay.
That. So, as you're aware, we have closed all of our extension offices to public access statewide. In terms of additional cleaning instructions, we have not provided those, but they are all, keep in mind, all county offices are county facilities. So that's a good point. Our administrative team does a daily meeting with regional directors, and I'll bring that up with our regional directors to discuss and they'll be working with county directors to make sure that we're implementing as adequate cleaning protocols at all of our offices for our employees, because that's all that are in them at this time.
Great, thank you.
Okay, so another question, and it's on the issue of telecommuting and keeping offices open. So there's a little bit of confusion. We're saying that telecommuting, everybody do this if you possibly can, but then on the other hand, we're saying that offices do need to be manned to some degree. So how do we what is that going to look like?
Yeah, and that, this is an area, again, we've got no experience with this to speak of, so we're really in a mode where we're all learning how to do this and how to achieve those somewhat conflicting objectives, but I don't think they have to be in conflict. I think first, it always is going to be dependent upon a person's responsibilities and their location and that environment. And so it's really hard to put out global guidance on here's exactly how telecommuting looks for you, because we may not have a globally comprehensive view of every single situation. So first thing, without a doubt, visit with your direct supervisor, identify some key responsibilities, some key activities that you plan to be involved with in terms of telecommuting. At the same time, that supervisor may well say, there are 3 things have to be done in this office on a weekly basis, and I need someone to do them 1 day a week, or I need us to figure out a way that we rotate those duties. They just can't be done by telecommuting. And the best example I can think of that might be somewhat universal is making deposits of money. It's really hard to do that virtually unless all the money comes in online. But if we have cash or checks that we've accepted for some reason, we still have to deposit that money, and that's going to take a person physically present to do that. But let's figure out arrangements to do that where it doesn't take everyone in the whole office to do it, and let's make sure they don't have to do it 5 days a week and 40 hours of that week and so forth. So let me stress how important it is to visit with your supervisor and to continue to communicate with your supervisor as to not only what you plan to do, but what you have accomplished. Because one of the things I anticipate in a week or two, I'll be asked by the president or by the General Assembly, well, what has the Institute of Agriculture done? We know you're still on the job, if you will, still being paid. What are some of the key accomplishments that you've made during this coronavirus pandemic? I think it'd be great for us to have a list of examples where we've served animal owners in some extensive way, or we've gotten out information to farmers about available labor that they were having trouble with, or maybe we've discovered new ways to reach our family audiences who are now preparing meals at home for the first time in a long time. So there's just a whole lot of ways I think that we can be engaged, that we can help. We can still do it remotely, but let's make sure and capture those impacts as we always would and report those back up through your supervisor so that we've got a good story to tell in the future that complements the work being done.
Right. There's a question regarding tenure track, and someone says that they've seen references now to automatic adjustment of the tenure clock for pre-tenure track faculty due to COVID. And can you just talk a little bit more in detail about how that might look?
Yeah, that's a great question. I know the chancellors and the president talked about this a week ago, anticipating that as normal operations change and individuals who are in the process of working towards tenure may feel like some of their work has been disrupted to the point that it's disadvantaging them or will disadvantage them in their quest to achieve tenure, that we do expect a change in board policy to allow anyone who feels they've been disadvantaged to ask that their tenure clock be extended. I'm not sure that it could or should be automatic. That's still to be determined, because I can also envision some individuals saying, well, I've been able to keep things rolling along as well as I need to. And in fact, by being at home and not having meetings every single day, I've written 3 new grants and published 3 new publications that I hadn't planned to do. So I think it's still going to be somewhat individually specific, but I think the opportunity would be available to all. So rather than automatic, I think I would say it would be a a broad-based option open to everyone.
So we've had another question come through, and this is regarding students who are requesting unemployment. Do you recommend our campuses also to allow students and temporary employees to telecommute, or is this a departmental decision?
So I think we've been universal in our thinking that we don't want to interrupt or suspend pay for anyone, including student workers. But we have to make sure they're actually working, right? So that's the trick. Let's suppose a student worker has been assigned to an office or a department, and the tasks they were doing were probably in-person type tasks. The question is, can we establish some remote working responsibilities for them, some tasks that they can do? And if we can, let's do that and be creative in how we go about doing that, and continue to pay them according to their appointment or according to their sort of approximate historical work hours. And is it a departmental decision? It certainly is. It's those student workers would still be an employee of whatever unit they're assigned to, and it would be, again, a function of what their direct supervisor determines in terms of their responsibilities. But I would say this is a time to be creative, to be flexible, to encourage a new and open approach to things, and try to be sure that we help our students as well as we're helping all other employees.
Great. Well, it looks like those are all our questions. So Dr. Cross, do you have any final thoughts that you'd like to share?
Well, I do. I always have final thoughts. First and foremost, I think about how important it is, in order for us to be effective as an institute, to really approach things from here forward on the basis of trust. And I think that trust hopefully is two ways. I know, trust our employees to do the right thing, to be honest and ethical as they approach their work responsibilities in a different manner, whether it be remotely or through flexible scheduling, whatever it is. I'm so thankful that we have a workforce that we can count on to do the right things. And I hope that everyone within the Institute has the confidence in our administrative leadership team. They don't have the ability to see that team function like I do, but we've got a great team that's really been putting forth a lot of effort to think about those 4 priorities I mentioned, and to develop guidance then that helps us to meet all 4 of those priorities and continue to enable our workforce to be out there, be productive, teach our students, help animals with healthcare needs, teach farmers and families and youth across the state, and keep key research projects going on without abandoning projects or research along the way. So let's really think about that the next week or so. The last week we've been in almost crisis mode, if you will, just trying to figure out how to achieve this social distancing as rapidly but as logically as possible. I think in the coming weeks then, let's shift our focus to, all right, now that we've got some arrangements established, let's be really firm and explicit about responsibilities. Let's start reporting some impacts, and let's think about how to make this institute better in the process, so that when this virus is over, we're ready to really continue on what I see as a very positive trajectory, serving the state of Tennessee and beyond. So finally, it's Friday afternoon. I'm impressed that 99 people wanted to spend an hour in a fireside chat on a Friday afternoon. That's outstanding. What I would encourage you 99 people and all your coworkers to do is to read a message we're going to be sending out in just a little while that has some ideas about how you can take care of yourself, and how you can, by doing that, better take care of your family and better carry out your job responsibilities. Think about yourself tonight and this weekend. Think about some ways to relax and get away, to get some exercise, as Dr. Souza mentioned, get outside. So Dr. Elizabeth Strand is a faculty member in the College of Veterinary Medicine. She's nationally known for developing a veterinary social work program. She's going to share a few ideas with you again in just a little while. Read those, take care of yourself this weekend, and I hope wake up Monday morning refreshed, ready to pursue another week of this new world under coronavirus, but recognizing that you got help and support from your administrative team. And if you have ideas that you feel like would benefit us, share them. Please forward them on through your supervisor, through your regional director, department head, direct to me. However it comes, we welcome the input. We're doing our very best to be open and transparent as we work through this process. And I think encouraging two-way communications is one way to do that. So I recognize that seems a little odd when we said everybody's muted, and now I'm saying communicate with us. But when there's 99 online at one time, it's not very feasible to have multiple conversations. That doesn't mean we can't continue this conversation in the coming days and weeks. So I want to thank everyone for being on. Thank you for what you do. You're really a valued part of our institute. We couldn't do this without you. And wish you and your family the very best throughout the weekend and again in the weeks and months ahead.
Great. We appreciate your leadership, Dr. Cross, during this really difficult time. And thanks to everybody. Have a wonderful weekend.